You know that feeling when your vision is clear, but progress isn't? You can see what could be, you can even feel what should be. But every week seems to blur into the next, and somehow things just don't move forward. You're working hard, staying faithful, giving your best. But inside, you sense something isn't aligned. I know that feeling because I've lived it. A few years ago, everything looked healthy from the outside. I was leading multiple teams, mentoring leaders, speaking into organizations, and pouring energy into projects I believed in. But one morning, I remember sitting at my desk, surrounded by notes, whiteboards, and plans, and realizing I felt exhausted, but unclear. The work was good. The mission was right. But something had drifted. I was busy, but not effective. I was moving, but I'd lost momentum. It felt like driving with fog on the windshield, still moving, but unsure if I was headed exactly where God wanted me. That moment became a turning point for me, because what I discovered was that my problem wasn't leadership. It wasn't motivation. It was clarity. And I've seen the same thing in countless leaders since. Pastors, executive, nonprofit directors, business owners. Drift doesn't start with rebellion or laziness. It starts with fog. I'm Phil Routley, and this is the 1% Leader, where we help faith and vision-driven leaders rise above complexity, regain clarity, and lead with confidence that endures. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now let's dig in. Vision can be clear even while direction is foggy. In that season, my vision was as strong as ever. I knew what God had called me to do, to help leaders move from scattered effort to unified action. But somewhere along the way, the direction grew complicated. I'd added too many projects, said yes to too many opportunities, and filled my schedule with good things that diluted the main thing. Maybe you've been there too. I said to myself, this is growth. This is stewardship. But deep down, I was trying to maintain momentum by adding more movement. What I didn't realize was that I had confused shared passion with shared clarity, even within my own work. See, vision is a part of why you exist. Clarity defines what happens next. And when those two drift apart, alignment disappears, quietly at first, and then visibly in the results. You can feel it before you can measure it. Energy rises, but impact stalls. You start to sense frustration in your team or even in yourself, and soon you're leading out of habit rather than conviction. That's what was happening to me. The vision was still true, but the path had become quite foggy. The Bible says in Habakkuk 2:2, write the vision and make it plain so he may run who reads it. That verse doesn't say make it poetic or inspiring. It says make it plain. Because clarity doesn't make your vision smaller, it makes it actionable. When the vision is made plain, people can run. They know where to focus, what success looks like, and how to move together. So let me ask you what I had to ask myself in that season. If someone on your team or even in your family asks, what does success look like for us in the next 90 days? Would everyone answer the same? If not, it's not a leadership failure, it's a clarity gap. And clarity gaps don't fix themselves. They expand quietly until you name them and narrow them again. That's when I began to realize that drift always begins where clarity ends. And that's exactly where we'll go next. When clarity fades, activity always increases. We start doing more but accomplishing less. That was me in that season. I was working harder than ever. Longer days, tighter deadlines, endless lists. Every new idea felt like the one that would fix everything. but instead of gaining momentum, I just created more motion. It looked productive, but it wasn't purposeful. And that's what I want to help you avoid today. Because if you're not careful, activity becomes your comfort zone. When you don't know exactly where you're headed, doing more feels safer than slowing down. You can tell yourself, at least I'm moving. But movement without direction eventually leads to exhaustion, not progress. That's the hard truth I had to face. I wasn't leading with clarity. I was compensating for the lack of it. The fog wasn't from fatigue. It was from being frantic. I see this all the time with leaders I coach. They're faithful, disciplined, and devoted, but they've been running on old clarity. What once was sharp has dulled over time. The mission hasn't changed, but the alignment has. And here's the principle. God does not bless motion. He blesses mission. That means busyness is not the same as faithfulness. You can fill your schedule and still miss your assignment. For me, that realization hit hard because I was still doing good work. But not all good work is your work. Sometimes the bravest thing a leader can do is stop. Stop repeating what's not working. Stop assuming alignment. Stop pretending that momentum equals direction. If you sense that what used to work isn't working anymore, don't ignore it. It's a signal, not a setback. It's God's way of saying, slow down long enough to see again. It's what I had to do. Took a few days away from the routine, no meetings, no calls, just time to pray, reflect, and ask hard questions. And in that quiet space, I realized I had drifted only 10 degrees off course. Not far enough to notice right away, but far enough that if I didn't correct it, I'd end up somewhere God never asked me to go. Maybe that's where you are right now. Still leading, still showing up, still faithful, but not fully aligned. And I get it. As leaders, we want to fix things fast. We want to make a plan, set a goal, and move again. But sometimes God calls us to stop before He calls us to start. Because clarity doesn't come from more information. It comes from quiet reflection and honest evaluation. You might be surprised what happens when you slow down long enough to listen. When you ask questions like, what has God actually called me to do in this season? What have I added that God never assigned? Where have I let the urgent crowd out the important? Those questions began to realign my heart long before they clarified my strategy, because the order matters. Clarity starts in the spirit before it flows into the systems. When I finally paused, I realized I'd been trying to solve a spiritual drift with strategic fixes. That never works. Strategy can't replace surrender. So if you're in a season where you feel like you're pushing harder but seeing less, maybe it's time to stop pushing. Maybe it's time to start listening. The good news is, drift doesn't have to be permanent. Once you can see it, you can correct it, and that brings us to the final principle where realignment begins. Because clarity always returns when you re-clarify your purpose. When I finally slowed down, I began to ask one question that changed everything. Lord, what have you actually called me to build in this season? And what have I added on my own? That question exposed what activity had been hiding. It revealed where I had been drifting, not in rebellion, but in over-responsibility. I'd taken on projects because I could, not necessarily because I should. I'd said yes to opportunities that looked good, but weren't aligned with my true calling. And in doing so, I had diluted the very clarity that once fueled my purpose. As I sat in prayer and reflection that morning, something shifted. The fog began to clear. I started to see not just what I was doing, but why. I realized clarity isn't just about knowing your direction, it's about realigning your devotion. Because when you lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing, even good work starts to drain you. So I went back to the foundation. I redefined my current assignment, not in theory, but in this season. Who had God called me to serve now? What message had He asked me to steward now? That process brought immediate focus. I cut away 2 projects that were good ideas, but not divine instructions, and I recentered everything on one goal: helping leaders regain clarity, confidence, and conviction in their calling. Then I simplified my systems. No more complexity, no more someday plans, just one clear direction and one clear message. Finally, I changed how I measured success. It used to be productivity, how much I could create or accomplish. But that morning I decided success would be obedience, faithfulness, not busyness. Because faith-driven leadership isn't about building bigger things. It's about building the right things. That's when peace returned. Not because my calendar cleared overnight, but because my purpose did. And that peace became fuel. Suddenly, decisions were easier. Communication was sharper. Momentum came back. And it wasn't forced. It was focused. That's what happens when you realign with clarity. Unity follows. And once unity returns, momentum becomes natural again. Henry Cloud once said, "Where there is no alignment, even good intentions lead to chaos." He's right. Every leader drifts at times, but the best leaders recognize it early and realign quickly. Clarity isn't a one-time event. It's a rhythm. It's a discipline of reflection and correction. That's why the 1% leader journey exists. It helps leaders like you build that rhythm, to pause long enough to diagnose drift, rediscover purpose, and rebuild direction with peace instead of pressure. Because when clarity returns, confidence follows. And when confidence is restored, impact multiplies. So let me ask you, where in your leadership have you lost sight of the why behind the what? Where have you been pushing harder when you really needed to see clearer? What would change if you reclaimed clarity today? Not next quarter, not next year, but now. Take a few minutes this week to ask God to show you the one place He wants to bring clarity again. Maybe it's your role. Maybe it's your pace. Maybe it's your priorities. Ask Him to make it plain. Because the moment He does, you'll start to feel that fog lift. You'll start to sense momentum again. And you'll lead from a peace instead of pressure. If today's message resonated with you and you're ready to regain clarity in your current leadership season, I'd love to help you personally. You can book a 1% Leader Clarity session, a focused 45-minute strategy call to help you realign your purpose, simplify your next steps, and create a 90-day plan you can lead with confidence. You can schedule yours by emailing me at phil@𝗏𝗏𝗺𝗀𝗺.com. Stay focused, stay faithful, and lead with confidence. I'm Phil Routley, and this is the 1% Leader. And remember, I'm always on your side.